them, which is probably fair warning not to. I just got such a kick out of the characters that are probably daily regulars in your dad's garage.
Oh yeah, we definitely have a cast of characters. It's yeah, there's and it's funny, some have passed on, and and it just seems like somebody replaces them, and it's like you said, there's a few chairs there, and yeah, we've got a few staples in the shop, and most of these guys have been around the off-road community for I don't know, 30, 40 years. They've been to Baja and Nevada and all over the place, and they have so many stories and experiences and things like that. Like you said, man, on any given day or evening, the beer starts flowing or the whiskey or the it's just the stories come out, man, and it's funny. It's like fish stories, because some of them I've heard a million times, and it seems like the stories just get bigger and bigger and bigger every single time they get told.
I think just as people, we should all strive to have more moments like that in life. Take time to hear the stories of the old timers, or your neighbor and stuff like that. We get wrapped up in moving so fast in our own agenda that sometimes we forget about looking around right where we're at and kind of those little hidden nuggets within the people in our own circle.
Yeah. And what's funny about that, Jim, is like, I've been able to experience, a lot of this, these stories and moments with my grandpa and with other people. And, it's funny, like you've accomplished a ton in your life. I've accomplished a ton in my life. But, some of the things that stick out the most to me are some of those moments, those small moments with some of these guys, and sharing a beer, sharing a story. That's stuff you don't forget. I mean, I can't tell you what I did Wednesday of last week, but I can tell you about a story one of these guys told me 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Now, this isn't an off-road show, and I committed to you when I started this show that I wouldn't spend too much time in off-road because that's where my roots are from. But I don't want to skirt over the fact that you've had a very successful off-road career, and I'm just curious. I don't even know if I've ever asked you, how did your off-road career start? And take us through the lifespan of that career real quick, because I know you're obviously still racing, but it didn't start when I met you. It started a lot of years before that.
Yeah, well, my dad, I grew up in it. I mean, my dad raced. My grandpa was a national champion, Hall of Fame boat racer, and then my dad got into racing, and and so I grew up. Literally, we've got pictures of me at the Parker 400 when I was 1 month old. So it's it's one of those things where I grew up in it. So it's just at some point in time you want to get behind the wheel, and I remember going pre-running with my dad in Baja, and him letting me drive the pre-runner, and almost crashed the damn thing at like 13 years old and things like that. And so I got I turned 18, 19, and then it was time for me to to kind of start racing, and I started out and won one of my first races. It was a pretty big one in Class 8. And, won a couple of races, some score races and things like that. And this is early 2000s, and kind of Class 8 was dying. Trophy truck was taking off. And so, I kind of ran some limited classes and, and some other oddballs. And, and Dad and I built this trophy truck. And literally, I can say I've got a trophy truck that I probably welded half the tubes on. I don't know how many trophy truck guys can actually say they welded half the tubes on their own personal trophy trucks, but I'm one of them.
Not many. Not many.
Yeah. So yeah, we kind of went through into that, and honestly had some success early on, a couple of podiums in trophy truck and things like that. And I can't, I don't know. It's success is kind of hard to say. It's one of those and I've had a lot of people say, like, if I would have, I'm always one of those, like, I would rather get 10th place running against the best in the world than get first place in a pool of 3 people who have never done anything. There's a lot of people that say, I've got Baja wins. Well, they raced against nobody. To me, a top 10 against the best in the world means a whole lot more than a win against nobody.
Sure.
in a class. So it was one of those where we didn't really have the budget to go trophy truck racing, but my dad's career was the same. Class 8 was where the big guys raced when he was, coming up. I mean, Walker Evans and Ivan Stewart and, Scoop Vessels, everybody raced, Class 8. So, Dad was in the trophy truck at the time, and so, I kind of took that same career path. And, it's one of those, like, I know if I had, a $2 million budget and a brand new trophy truck, I could run up front, but the truth is I don't. So I've, But I've had some success, and it's just one of those where we race when we can, we do what we can, and obviously I've kind of transitioned to running some Polaris Razors, the past couple of years, and had some fun projects with that and things like that. So I don't know. You measure success by wins and things like that. I probably am not at the top of the list, but if I guess if you measure success on how a program operates and, markets itself, I'd say we're probably up there with some of the best,
Yeah. Well, I know that you've got an incredible marketing program, like with Polaris, as you mentioned. I've known you from General Tires. I know you've got several other sponsors out there that you've worked with, but to me, success is being able to get out there, do what you love to do, and have the support of big sponsors like that, because they know you're doing things right. And by the way, okay, because I know you're not going to say this, when people ask me about off-road racing and they're looking at the truck and the console in the truck and like, oh, what does the other guy do in the truck? I'm like, well, he manages the GPS and tells me where to go and all this. 99.9% of all the trucks and cars out there have a passenger to help them out. But you, Jim Beaver, are solo, and you neglected to leave that out, that you raced that trophy truck solo, which is absolutely insane, crazy, balls to the wall. What inspired you to make that a single-seater?
Well, at the time, like, my dad was actually good friends with Dave Ashley and Dan Smith, and back we're talking early 2000s. They were kings of the world in trophy truck. They had that Durlast single seat trophy truck, and they were just dominating everything. And at that point, I was young 20s, and there was a point where I actually was trying to go to Europe and race Formula cars, and was talking with Australia about going down and doing some V8 supercar testing, and I was in really ridiculously good shape. And it was one of those where I was like, what, I think this will be different. Ashley and Smith have had some success. I think it's unique. It'll draw eyeballs. I want to build a single seater, and there's some drawbacks and there's some benefits to it. So we kind of went that way, and at this point in time, now my age and stuff, I wish I had a co-driver in there, no doubt. And I love racing the Razor and having a co-driver in there. But it was just one of those that, one, it was marketing, and two, it was just it was the same chassis as Ashley and Smith. They were having a ton of success. And it was just a different era of off-road and trophy trucks back then. And I don't think that I know Jamie Campbell, I think, is building a single-seat trophy truck right now there at Raceco, and I'm really excited because it's a beautiful truck that he's building. And it's like once a decade somebody gets the wild hair, they want to do a single seat trophy truck, and it's going to, his new truck's definitely going to draw some eyeballs. And I think that's it's kind of where we went with that. It was like, the uniqueness of it and things like that. It's like, what can we do to draw eyeballs? And, and it worked. It worked, it still does. I run it once or twice a year, and still to this day, I always get people posting pictures and tagging me and this guy's crazy and, and things like that. But just, it was a different era then,
Yeah, I get it. Well, appreciate you sharing some of the background on your off-road career and about Ford Motor Company and your family. I cut you off a while ago about your radio show that you decided to call a radio show, not a podcast. As I mentioned, again, I've had several people ask me, not just in the last couple of days, but in the last couple of years since I've been podcasting, how to get involved, how it all started for me. But can you go back to where you started with that story about the radio show that it could have been called a podcast, and walk us through a little bit of your early podcasting career?
Yeah, well, I started things out, and and like I said, I bought that cheap Walmart headset for $30 and decided to go start my own radio show online. And I didn't have a logo, I didn't have much of anything, and it was one of those. I started out, and I think I had 27 listeners to my first episode, and I had people in the off-road community knew who I was. So, and I had a few email addresses. So honestly, it was kind of one of those things. I went on Race Desert and posted, and I think, it was one of those, everybody goes, haha, yeah, good luck with this or whatever, and the first episode was hideous. It was bad. But, I just kept at it and just kept grinding and cranking away, and, and things got better. And, I was very lucky, like, a month or so in, I'd done a project with Ford and did a big favor for Ken Block. And, and up until that point, I really hadn't had, any big name guests. It was just kind of whatever, but I owed Ken Block. I kind of had an IOU with him, and it was one of those where I'm like, I need to cash this in, So I sent an email to his handler, and the guy goes, yeah, he says, I think we can organize Ken on your show for 20 minutes or a 20-minute interview with Ken. And I said, okay, and it was one of those, Ken wasn't going to advertise it, nothing. His show was bad, but it was an IOU, and I cashed it in. And so Ken comes on the show, and, here's a show with like 25 listeners, and now all of a sudden you've got Mr. Jim Conn, a viral superstar from Monster Energy and Ford on your show, and just having his name alone on there, people like, oh, wow, what the hell is Jimmy doing? There's, how the hell did he get Ken Block? Ken doesn't do interviews, and it was just one of those where I had that. And then once you have a guy like that on, it wasn't like numbers went viral or something, but it was just being associated that, hey, this guy's had Ken Block on your show. You can get anybody in the world on your show after that. It was just one of those where it was like, once you get that endorsement, and, just him being on the show was a bit of an endorsement. And then it opened up the doors where, immediately say, hey, I've got a show and I've had Ken Block on. Immediately like, yep, done. We'll do it. I think the week after Ken Block, I had Robbie Gordon, which actually in the off-road community came back, and it, that kind of legitimized me in the off-road community when you get, the top guy in off-road, on the show, and he's got his own following. So then things kind of steamrolled, and biggest thing is a lot of people start these shows, they get frustrated, they want these viral numbers, and unless you're a guy like Dak Shepard who has millions of social media followers and starts a podcast, they're going to be low numbers to start out with, but you just got to grind it, and like you and I have talked about, you got to keep doing it every single week. It's got to become a part of your life, and it's all right once in a while to miss a week or something like that, but by and large you just got to make it constant, and just constantly go, and it's a slow burn. And I was just fortunate that I was in the right place at the right time, and I was when this whole, internet radio and podcasting was in its infancy, and I was the only guy covering motorsports, especially, what we call now action motorsports, and, and so I've just stayed with it, and it's, when you're the first one there, it's, you're like the Coke or the Pepsi, and everybody else is, trying to catch up.
Yeah. Listen, I want to talk about that consistency for a second, because, I would imagine I'm going to forward this to those people that ask me about podcasting. And it's something that you taught me early on. And by the way, I don't think I was perfectly clear about it, but you produced my show for me. And I'm so grateful for that. And you're the one that got me my first show on the air and showed me how to do it all. So for those listening, Jim Beaver is the guy that got me on. And I'm very happy that he was able to do that for me. But you told me early on, there's a hump that you got to get over. And I think you said it was like 6 to 8 shows. Most shows don't make it over that. And you just got to get past that barrier and then just keep rolling. I mean, that was some good words of wisdom for me, because I thought I got to get past that 8th show. I think it's important to note that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, that's it. I can't remember what it is. It's like right around the 2-month marks, like people start and then they just like peter off, and it's just like, my numbers aren't good. I don't know what I'll do. And I tell people, I'm like, especially with podcasting, I'm like, do it for a year. Don't look at the numbers for the first year. Don't worry about money for the first year. Just worry about your content and your guests. And once you get that consistency, like it's sooner or later, the money will start coming in, you know what I mean? The numbers will start coming in, but it's like, you've just got to work on your craft to start with, and I think people are putting, sponsors and a bunch of other stuff way before, the craft. And like you've learned, I mean, I'm sure, I've listened to them, you've listened to them, your first podcast to what you're doing now, it's a completely different Jim and interview style and things like that. And I think we just, people get in a hurry oftentimes, and I think with anything, and they want that instant gratification. And, unless you're a celebrity, like I said before, you're not going to have that instant gratification. It's a slow burn. So it's like, work on your craft when you don't have that many listeners, because that's where you can make mistakes and fail, and nobody's going to butcher you over them, that's when you want to work on your craft. And then, as you get bigger, you know what I mean? Then, you're going to get all kinds of eyeballs on you, and, you're going to have the people who are positive, the people who are negative, and, and I think, but I just think with podcasting, a lot of times people, they hear about Joe Rogan and 1 million downloads and think, oh, well, if I can do 10% of that, well, you and I know, man, even 1% of that's hard.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I try to give people advice on as it relates to podcasts, because there's a lot of people that aspire to do them, And like you just said earlier, you went to Walmart, you got this, inexpensive headset, and you just plugged it in your computer. You did some research online, and you went to town. I encourage them to do the same thing. Don't over deliberate on how you're going to get this thing kicked off.